Hey there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from the Command Central headquarters of the Philanthropy Mastermind series. Happy to have you back. We are really looking forward to this one today, both because of the subject matter, but also our guests. But before I introduce them to you and do the usual stuff, I want to make sure to both welcome you and to welcome you to the chat and the Q&A, which we'll be using extensively today. So if you have questions or comments, please use those spaces. Our guests will be interacting with that as well. And it's a great place for you to post those questions as they occur to you. We want to make sure that that's working for you as well. So if you would, just go ahead and warm that space up for us, please, and just maybe say where you're here from, which institution, maybe what kind of work you do. Any of that would be very helpful to our guests. So you can do that right in the chat right now. We'd love that. And while you're going ahead and warming up that space, I do want to give a special shout out to our sponsors of the series, which are at DonorSearch. DonorSearch, of course, does tremendous work in the area of prospect research, prospect development, and AI, but they also have been providing a platform for this series going back to 2016. So we are very, very happy to have their support in providing an opportunity for us to learn from people like those who are going to be presenting to us today. And you can learn all about this series, as well as DonorSearch, over at the DonorSearch website at donorsearch.net. And under the resources tab, you'll find hundreds of recordings, both audio and visual, from this series, including one from one of our guests today, but I'll save a mention on that for just a second. And wow, thank you all for doing this, Monica and Anna and Crystal and Amy and Cindy. We really do appreciate your doing that. It's great to see where you're all from. Nice big cross-section of the country, maybe even the world, and also the kinds of roles that you have. So nice to know as we begin this discussion today. And for that, I want to welcome our two guests, of course, Emily and Cora, to take the stage, if you will, and say hello. So Emily is right there waving. Emily Marcuson told me, who has been in this series before and also has the top downloaded segment on Prospect Research 101. There are over 1,200 downloads of that thing right now. So we're really happy to have her back, and do check that out. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And also her colleague and friend, Cora Burns. And I'll just give a light introduction because they'll probably tell you a little bit more about themselves in a second. You know why you're here, of course. The session is on the dynamic duo, and we have that literally, prospect research and parent fundraising. Emily is, of course, Director of Prospect Management Research and Analytics at Skidmore College. Cora is Director of Parent Engagement and Philanthropy at Cornell University. We were, in fact, talking right before we went live about a conference that she is in the process of programming on the subject of parent fundraising. So this is all both her work and fresh on her mind. And it's such a pleasure to welcome you both and to sit back and learn from you now. Please take it away.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Jay. It's so nice to be back. On behalf of Cora and I, we just want to thank Philanthropy Masterminds for hosting us and for having us. We're excited to be here to talk about the dynamic duo between prospect research and parent philanthropy. And I think Cora has some slides that she's going to put up for us, and then we're going to get started.
I do. Give me 1 second and... Let me know if that works, Em.
Yes, I see it on my end. Okay. So we're just going to get started and go over a quick agenda just to let everybody know what we will be discussing today. The first thing that we're going to dive into a little bit is why parents. So we're going to talk a little bit about the expedited donor cycle and really dive into why there's a real opportunity to not only have fundraising success with this expedited donor engagement cycle, but build a relationship that can far exceed graduation. So we'll definitely get into some of the nuts and bolts of that. Prospect research. That's kind of my wheelhouse. That's the area that I'll be talking mostly about today. We'll dive into how the process of research right out of the gate will ignite the whole process of the ongoing collaboration and partnership with parent and family giving team and prospect research. I say we kind of go together like cookies and milk. So I think that'll be a really fun topic to discuss. Then we're going to evolve into the leveraging of parents. That's really Cora's wheelhouse, and she's going to get into the nitty gritty of how the aspects of parent and family giving is a unique one, and how that ongoing relationship with research is really critical in the build up to those important giving conversations that she's having, especially on things like Senior Family Project and other parent fundraising initiatives. And then we're going to wrap up and talk a little bit about that creative partnership that continues on, and the work that Prospect Research has with parents and family giving, and taking a little bit of a deeper look at data analytics and how it just continues. It's an ongoing evolution. So with that, we're going to kick it off.
Thanks, Emily. So I'm obviously here to talk about parent philanthropy. It's near and dear to my heart, something I've always done. I've never really worked with alumni. I started working with parents and just never looked back. And, you know, when you think of parents, you hear of all the numbers that are going out right now around alumni. Alumni giving's down, not parent funds, annual funds are down. And you want to find other sources of support. And parents are a great resource, and they're primed and ready. Parents are, especially our highest capacity parents, they're almost already educated in philanthropy, and they're ready and almost expected to be asked. And so that really kind of primes the pump, ready for parents. And the great thing about parents is you can really, if done right and done with great partners on campus, especially with research, one of my favorites, you know what, you can really get them to give beyond their 4 years that everyone assumes. And even in today's challenging fundraising climate, I mean, I don't think it's more relevant than these days to talk about stuff like this, but parents are giving and they're showing up. And it's really wonderful to see. And so there are ways to work with parents. That's refreshing and exciting. And so part of the ways we work with parents, I always say, parents are just donors. I know there's all these connotations. I always hear often, oh, parents are hard, parents are this, they get upset, they're helicopter parents. The fact of it is parents are donors, right? And they're donors with some quirks, but they're donors like young alumni are donors. They're donors like athletic donors are donors. They just have some kind of, there's just things about them that are unique to this cohort. One of the biggest ones, and one that we all know, is there is an expedited timeline. I just talked about how we go beyond the 4 years. But in order to go beyond those 4 years, you've got to do it right during the 4 years that they're here. So there's an expedited timeline that we are working with, and we have to engage parents during those, and especially during the first 2 years. And when I say engage, it doesn't necessarily mean giving. So if they don't give in the first 6 months, it doesn't mean you get rid of them out of your pool. It just means you have to engage them a little longer because they may not be ready. The other thing that we all know about parents is they're very heavily tied to their students and or their children, I'm going to say. It's not always just their student that's on campus. They have other children. They have children in prep schools, and they have other children probably in other college and universities. And so there are things that you have to think about when you're working with parents. Again, research is a great partner and helps out a lot of this. And that kind of leads into that conflicting priority. You know, parents are trained from prep and private schools, but it's not like once they're done with the prep and private
I'm not sure if Cora has, it looks like Cora may have some technical difficulties.
Well, it must be an internet problem on her end, because we noticed it too, and we thought it was perhaps us. So if you're out there in the audience, don't worry. I'm sure Cora will be coming back.
You know what? I actually have the presentation. Cora will probably be back on just as soon as she can, but I can also continue going. Let me see. I think I can close this and I can get back to this part here. So Jay, I'm just going to continue on, and I'm sure Cora can pop back on here when she can. Let me just double check real fast and see. Okay, she'll be back on shortly. So while she's rebooting herself, I'm going to talk a little bit about prospect research, and specifically what prospect research's role is in the whole process with the parent and family giving office. So it really starts with collaboration and partnership. Those are my two key words in this relationship with parent fundraising. Collaboration is the key component to the process because we rely heavily on our campus partners right out of the gate. And I keep saying out of the gate because we are, Skidmore College is based in Saratoga Springs, and I always like to bring in our horse racing roots here because we are home of the Saratoga race course, and health, history, and horses is our name to fame here. But really, I think it makes sense in this context because we really do rely on our campus partners to have access to biographical data that we then use to help identify potential families who may be interested in supporting the college's mission financially. So we rely on our CRM and our partners in operations, advancement operations here. They are wonderful in uploading biographical data information, which we have access to. I'll note that this identification process not only identifies high capacity families, but also potential volunteers for programming and other committee work. So absolutely, are we looking for families that can support parent fundraising initiatives? Of course. But we're also looking for parents who may have a really interesting career background, who might be a wonderful speaker in a class, or maybe would be a great addition to a career jam that we have on campus as well. So we're always kind of looking at all of those different perspectives when we're screening or looking at an incoming families. Another element of that identification is the usage of third-party vendors. And of course, one of those would be DonorSearch. So we use those third-party vendors for wealth screening. And in addition to that, we also apply an internal weighted system to those results that we get back from in this case, DonorSearch. It's nice to have that third-party vendor because it gives us a jumping off point. It allows us to segment and prioritize our list on our end to really look at those prospects that are showing philanthropic behavior outside of the college, because most of them have not even given to us, have not even given to their students' institution yet. So we want to see what their patterns of philanthropy are coming into our institution. And the best way to do that is through a third-party vendor. So by using that, and in addition to our own internal weighted system that we have created within our prospect research shop, these are all the pieces of the puzzle that allows us to really create a segmented list that helps us prioritize families for our fundraisers over in parents and family giving. And this is so that they can have that targeted engagement and really go into those conversations with a really full picture. Analysis is another piece that I'll touch on a little bit now, and we're going to see some other examples of that in future slides here. But The analysis piece of what prospect research does, I think, is something that has really evolved over the years. When I started in prospect research in 2008, and I started doing parent research that first year, analysis really wasn't something that was on our radar. And honestly, I think for a lot of us in the prospect research world, analysis and data visualization specifically has really kind of revved up in the last couple of years, and with the birth of AI, of course. These are things that if you're not doing it in your research shops, and you're not doing it in conjunction with your fundraisers, you're potentially leaving money behind. So you really want to lean into analysis as much as you can. We do a lot of analysis around, for example, Senior Family Project or other fundraising initiatives that are parent focused. And it allows us to segment lists for our parent fundraisers so that they can focus on key milestones for their, family students' academic journeys, but while also really targeting and spending their time and efforts on families that I think will make a really great impact on the institution. So with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, this is the incoming class screening that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. I mentioned in the last slide about that third-party vendor, DonorSearch, who we rely on quite a bit for running our incoming freshman or first-year families through. And you'll see here that the green boxes are ones that we in research will use internally and create kind of a weighted system. So you'll see DS rating, which our fellow DonorSearch friends will recognize. Foundations, nonprofits, the largest gift found, lower range. We rely on that one. We tend to be a little bit more conservative in our shop, so that's the one that we kind of rely on. Those are returned from DonorSearch, but then the things like the DS rating weight, the foundation weight, the estimated gift weight, those are things that we will look into from our perspective, and we might add a 1 or a 2, and then we apply that over a filter over all of our results to kind of prioritize and segment which families might bubble up to the top based on all of this. And those are the ones that the families that we might start with, knowing that those are the families that may be able to provide, the most financial support to our institution. So I also wanted to point out the screening notes. This is something that other institutions may be doing too, but this is something that's near and dear to us in our research shop here at Skidmore, because it's something that I know our fundraisers really, really appreciate. So we add all of our screening notes into our CRM, but then we synthesize all of them into this very nice little paragraph that really gives our fundraisers a quick snapshot of who these parents and who these families are, maybe a quick snippet about their philanthropy. In this case, it's Mickey and Minnie Mouse and their young son Tiny Mouse, class of 22, coming to Skidmore, and we do a quick assessment on their actual educational backgrounds, their quick employment history. In this case, Mickey Mouse is chair of his family's foundation. We put in there that their most recent giving was that $20 million to Disney University. We do think it's important to note if Tiny comes as an ED1 applicant versus an ED2 or a regular admission. I'll say with our experience, our ED1s and ED2s, our early decision students, the ones that have raised their hands and said, you are our first choice for college, is usually where most of our high capacity families are in our screening process. So we always think it's important to include that. We then will assign an internal rating. That P6 is as an internal rating for us at Skidmore, and that is our most our highest capacity rating, which is $5 million plus over a 5-year period. So a little something just about the metrics analysis I mentioned before, about some of that work that we do with our parent fundraisers throughout the duration of those quick 4 years, right? So one thing that we do is we really like to create, for instance, this is an example of a donor pyramid. And we do this, this was actually done in response to a request for a senior family project fundraising initiative. We will typically refresh all of our highest rated capacity families that going into senior year ahead of any type of senior fundraising initiative, just to see if there is anything, you know, of significance that has changed with that family. For instance, maybe a new employment or philanthropic behavior outside of the college. If they are giving, you know, to another institution where another child might be, or a secondary school in honor of a younger sibling's graduation. Those are things that we like to capture, because then we can help the parent fundraiser team create a logical and accurate gift projection to then go out and solicit ahead of that. So we like to do a lot of that groundwork ahead of time, so that way there really aren't any surprises going after that. So I'm going to talk just a second about the path to integration. I'm going to take the first couple here, and I see Cora's back, so she's going to do.
I am. Hello, everybody.
No worries. So we're going to, and then Cora will take the last couple on this slide. As I mentioned, okay, so the path to integration, right? So evaluate. It's always the hope of research that this initial screening that we do will really set the foundation for a successful relationship with the college that's being driven by the parent fundraising team. So all of that hard work that we do, typically right now in the spring, is going to be the end game is that the gift officers are going to be armed with knowledge to be strategic with ongoing prospect strategy. So after that initial screening, we typically work really closely with the leadership within the parent fundraising team to not only identify those key parents, and usually that's done by rating or other things. It could be, as I mentioned before, we also look into employment and other things of interest that that may lead to committee work or maybe coming into a class to speak. But we also want to assign them to gift officers early in the process. So Cora mentioned before about that early engagement piece. If we can have their philanthropic advisor assigned to them really early in this process, it gives them a name and a face to rely on throughout the process of their student being here on campus. So we try and do that really early in the process. Usually that's a summer. I'm going to say, like, you know, August is a great time to do that within the screening process if you are in prospect research and are really either, you know, starting this process or August is really a great time to do that ahead of everybody coming back onto campus. And I'm sure Cora will talk a little bit about those, sometimes like a parent send-off or some of those other events that early identification and assignment really makes sense. That identification piece is it's a piece that the knowledge that a fundraiser is able to garner from detailed notes on any prospect, including those parent screening notes that I mentioned before, it provides that full picture of what makes a family tick. And so when I say that, it's not necessarily what makes it's that passion that makes them want to give back. It's that what makes them be philanthropic. And a lot of our high capacity families as Cora noted before, they are waiting. They come into your institution and they're just waiting to be contacted, because a lot of these families are coming from private secondary schools, and this is not new to them. So it's honestly going to be weird if you don't contact them pretty early in the process. I remember several years ago when I first started in prospect research, and I first started working with the parents team, there was always that hesitation to reach out early because of the fear of a melt, right? So sometimes students may not last the full first year, and then you invested all this time and energy into a family who may eventually leave. But I think, and Corey can correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of shifted a little bit. I've seen our parents team kind of take a risk on that anyway. And we've actually had families that have melted away, but have still stayed engaged with the college, even though their student has moved on to another institution, because of those interactions and engagement efforts that have occurred between the gift officer and their families. So I do think that having that identification process, allowing the gift officer to have being armed with some of that information that may sometimes in the past have taken several meetings to actually get out of potential prospect, and kind of skipping over some of those initial getting to know you all the time type meetings, really makes the approach go much faster, much swifter, and it allows you to get to the nitty-gritty things a little bit faster. That prioritize piece is really about prospect management. This is that ongoing relationship between prospect research and parent philanthropy. So we do biannual prospect pool reviews here. We are constantly cycling parents in gift officer pools as they are qualified. Sometimes we move them out. Our status or stages, as some institutions call them, really capture and are able to provide movement throughout the donor engagement cycle, so we can really see where that family is at any given time. And in conjunction with that updated analysis, such as the donor pyramid, it really provides clean data that gift officers can then adapt and use to strategize to make really clear, actionable next steps with any parent or family. And clean data is money. So we take a lot of pride in that in prospect research. So Cora, I'm going to kick it over to you for the solicit piece.
Thank you, Emily. A, for covering, and B, thank you for everyone for your patience, as I had like a little technical snafu. I swear my computer was plugged in, so it wasn't that. For some reason, it just decided to recycle in the middle of a presentation, as always, as it always happens. So as I was saying before, the solicitation and the work we do with parents is really about, you want to engage early. You want to accelerate that ask because we are on that tighter timeline, but also you want to provide ways for them to give. And I know that sounds so intuitive, but when I say that, we're talking about it like when you're working with alumni, you have reunions, you have these big moments that happen that are natural opportunities, we'll call them emotional pinpoints where they're going to be more inclined to give. And you want to create those for parents as well. And so when we do solicitation and we work with prospect research on things like this, it's really great to have a comprehensive understanding of the family, and great prospect work provides that. When I work with parents and I look at some of our donors, again, we talked about competing priorities. They have other students, they have their own alma mater, and they're on other boards, other communities. And it's great to understand, when you have really great research and you have a really great research team that can tell you, hey, they're on these boards right now, but even Emily and her team is sometimes able to be like, hey, but they're about to roll off, or they just made this big gift. It's probably a pledge. And it paints this really beautiful picture of the donor or of the parents' entire philanthropic landscape. And it helps me understand where you can slide in, what you can do. And that's the great part of what they do and how it helps me solicit. The other thing too is, again, we always talk about that condensed timeline. And, when Emily talked about identifying and getting all this information, with alumni, you have 4, 5, 6, a lifetime of visits to be able to gather this information. With parents, we try to do it as soon as possible. So when I get as much information as I can from my donor team, from my research team, I know which questions I need to ask, and it limits, it really reduces the amount of questions that I need to ask, and I can pinpoint on what information I'm going to need to know if they're inclined, if they're ready for a solicitation, and when that might be. And it lets me just get the same information that we usually get from alumni over a longer period of time in almost one visit. In one visit, I'm going to go in, Emily's already identified them, or my prospect team, your prospect team has already identified them. In that first visit, you get to qualify them, almost cultivate them, and then even solicit them, all in that first visit. And that's the key with parents. So that solicit really works heavily, and the ability to solicit well is so reliant on the data and the information that we have going into the meeting, so that we can expedite the questions and the information that we need to know before we know they're ready to be solicited. And then, again, when I'm talking about providing ways to give, that goes into that innovative look of how we work with research. The donor pyramid that Emily showed you and the analysis that we did with the Senior Family Project, that's something when we started doing the Senior Family Project, it's almost like a mini campaign. There's feasibility studies that we did just to see what our goal might be or could be, and how do we stretch it. And so being able to run that refreshed analysis, and then also look at who should be our top donors, who should we be focusing on, really helps with that. The way we use research data for our high capacity invitation lists is essential. When we look at families who have ties to foundations and organizations, that is another key thing that we look at. And the research team is able to tell us if they sit on the board, if they have a say in that organization, and if they don't, then we know that there's going to be a larger conversation that needs to be had. And my question to the families will be like, so, tell me about the foundation. How does it work? How do you work with it? What does it support if it's not already identified in the research? And always with they're really great with the early gap identification as well. That is a key thing that I use every year with research, and understanding with our data, where is the gap from last year to this year? How do we make it up in our dollars? Parents are such a fluid cohort. When you look at parents, not only are they fluid, meaning senior family moves out and a whole new different class moves in, so the makeup is different, but also, again, as we said, they have very close family ties. So a huge donor, someone who was very committed and connected to the institution, something happens with a student and suddenly they fall off. I'm sure many people who've worked with parents have heard about the arc of giving. And I really think of it more like a highway of parents in these 4 years, because parents will inevitably come off the giving highway and then come back on when things change, whether there are students off campus and that impacts their engagement level and thus impacts their giving, or they just had a bad experience or something happened and they just need time away, but then they come back, or they're not ready to hop on that first initial outreach and that first, during orientation, but yet they're ready to hop on after the first semester, second year. And so that's how we like to think about parents. But when you have that external data that research is able to provide and the analytics, that really helps paint the whole picture and kind of see, it helps us anticipate when parents are ready to engage and the questions we need to ask. So that's a lot about the innovation.
So in the last time that we have in our presentation today, Cora and I thought it would be really kind of fun and interesting to do an actual case study of a family that is about to start their new journey at their child's institution. So as we think about this and just thinking, going back to the beginning of where it all started, this may or may not be based on factual people that names have been changed. Just think of it as Mickey and Minnie Mouse. So Mickey Mouse, they're Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Their son, Tiny Mouse, is coming to the institution. And in prospect research, we will identify that family pretty early on, because if you remember, Tiny Mouse applied ED1. So we will have that information, screen them through DonorSearch, along with a whole bunch of other families that are also committed in ED1 and ED2. And once we get that, the results back from DonorSearch, and we apply our internal weighted metrics on top of that, Mickey and Minnie Mouse are probably going to bubble up to the top of our spreadsheet. And because we will want to identify that family pretty quickly in our overall parent screening process, we will start with any of those parents that are a DS1-1, which again, for our DonorSearch friends will know is one of our top tier returns. So DS1-1 for anyone who's not with DonorSearch usually is an indicator of high total identifiable wealth assets, which usually is heavily linked to things like real estate, tangible things like real estate, SEC holdings, salaries, anything that's tangible that we can identify in that way. And also may be showing philanthropic behavior outside of our institution of at least $5,000 or more. And so those are our names that we typically will want to start with first, because those are our potential prospects who are showing that philanthropic behavior. So that means they are probably more inclined to engage with us and more receptive to early outreach. So in this case, Mickey and Minnie Mouse would certainly be at the top of that list, and we will perform an internal screening in conjunction with all of that good information that came back from DonorSearch. So the reason why we do that is because if you're in a smaller shop, you may not have the bandwidth to do that, and that's okay. Like I said, if you rely on those DS tiers, for example, or if you have another third-party vendor such as iWave or maybe Target Analytics, you can certainly use any of those internal analytical codes that they have as well. But we we like to confirm. So we will, especially with those really high capacity families that are returned on our list, we will take the time to actually vet and confirm that they are who we think that they are. After that process, we do our parent screening note. We go through this process pretty much the entire spring. It's important to note that many of these families, they have no prior connection to our institution. We do have alumni, obviously, that are also parents. But for the most part, when we think about all of our most engaged parent families, most of them are not alum couples in our case, or alums that became parents. Most of our most philanthropic parent donors really have been those families that have come to us with no prior connection. So we identify them early in the process, and that allows us to be really thoughtful and work really closely with our parents team about strategic next steps, such as I mentioned before, that assignment process. So assigning to our gift officer teams, maybe even relying a little bit on our board of trustees to ask if any of them know Mickey and Minnie Mouse already, because if we can identify some of the boards that Mickey and Minnie serve on already, there could be some overlap there. So sometimes the best engagement happens from our nearest and dearest, such as our board of trustees or other high-level volunteers as well. And we're really able to strategize next steps because of some of that information that we're able to capture really early on in the process. And as I mentioned before, sometimes if you can find those passion points for an incoming family, whether that be mental health issues, whether it's, anything that might, secondary schools, anything that kind of paints a picture of what their philanthropic priorities might be and how that aligns with our, with the institution's mission. It's only a benefit to the gift officer and how they continue to move through that engagement cycle. And I'm going to pitch it over to Cora to give some more perspective on that from the fundraiser point of view.
From the fundraiser point of view, that early identification is so great, and there's nothing better than having a researcher come into your office super excited and
we're always excited.
Dying to tell you about a prospect that they just found, and they're like, there's a person. And what's great about it is you get to hear about it, you hear the excitement, and it makes you excited. And so when you go to send-offs or you have orientation, you're just looking for this person, and you want to make that early engagement. And having that, again, having that data, having that information is so critical, because it sets you up well to know, where are the holes in this picture and what are the questions I need to ask to be able to take it to the next step. So, within this case study, when you get a family who's new, and there's some good wealth capacity and donor inclination to other institutions, hopefully, so, at Cornell, we have a lot of families that are legacy. And so you do have some of that, but either with or without that alumni connection, it is great information to have. And you can really hone in on these families and try to get that first visit, make that face-to-face, so that when you do reach out again, when you're in their area and having those the actual conversations, it makes it just that much easier. And it lets you engage them thoroughly and try to figure out where they are or where they want the relationship they want to have with your institution early on. So that's the great thing about that early identification. And when you're thinking about those first steps of fundraising and cultivating and identifying those families. Did you?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I think you said it perfectly. You know, I think it's so, it's such a wonderful partnership to have, and it's really, it's always so exciting to see it come full circle, right? So we've had so many moments where we have identified a family in this process, and then to see it come full circle senior year, and really seeing the excitement on the family, you know, from the family as they know that they're, you know, making an impact, whether it's through a scholarship or through, you know, some kind of a summer experience that they might be funding, or even just, you know, giving to the Senior Family Project. It really makes it all worth it, you know, to know that they are leaving their legacy here in, you know, maybe in honor of their student, but it really came to fruition because of all the work that we're doing behind the scenes.
Yeah. And, you know, and when you have a new family, again, part of this, you know, take this family that came in, didn't know much about the institution, you know, you're able to engage them based on that research, but then the research continues, right? So you get to, when the research does a refresh, especially around the senior year, you get to figure out, you know, where they're at. And it really kind of adds this extra layer to the questions and the relationship you've already built, but it gives you the perspective of some of this information that you don't want to ask, like what other boards, what other, you know, those are questions you do ask, but there are some questions that are a little more sensitive, and it's good to have that in the back of your head as an understanding so that you can kind of lead them down a path. So if you know that the health and wellness is important to them and there are other aspects of their life, you can really early on start talking about the work that your institution does. And it kind of brings them away from their students' experience and more into the family philanthropy, which is really what develops that relationship beyond the 4 years. You know, when you can get past just the student experience and go deeper into, now you're fulfilling something that's meaningful to the person, the parent, that's when you get them on the board. And that's every time we've done this, and I've worked with Emily on this with parents, that's Skidmore. That's how we get them on the board of trustees. It goes past what the student was doing to what their true passion is and what they really want to support and the change they want to make. And so I think that's the other great thing, that continued research and that continued partnership really helps propel you into a whole different stratosphere of parent giving.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that we are able to continue the partnership between prospect research and parent giving, you know, even after families move on. A lot of times, I know Cora will know about this too, a lot of times, especially here at Skidmore, we like to keep families assigned to the same gift officer. So not only is our you know, our parent fundraisers working with, you know, parents for several years, but they end up starting to know their, you know, the students as well. So that relationship continues on. And in some cases, that relationship will just be an easy transfer from the parent into, you know, now a young alum. And then how that relationship continues to evolve over the years is really interesting too, especially when you have some longevity in different you know, fundraising shops within advancement. It's just really interesting and neat to see that come along, and that transition of philanthropy that happens. If we have time at the end, Cor, maybe we can talk a little bit about that transition between, I have to see, I know we have some people in chat that might be asking some questions too, but maybe we can talk a little bit about how you do that transition of power sometimes.
Yeah, the transition of wealth is so important between families and students. But Emily, there is a good question about international families, which is always an interesting subject. we'll say it at that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So there is also some, okay, so I'll say there has been an evolution with international families, especially in terms of prospect research. So when I first started in prospect research several years ago, my goodness, a long time ago, we absolutely screened incoming international families. And I'll say here at Skidmore, I think the statistic is about 14% around that actually come from, our international students that come in an incoming class. And we would treat those international families very similarly in that, unfortunately, we cannot run them through quite accurately through like a third-party vendor, just because there's some limitations there when it comes to screening, international families versus domestic families. But because of GDPR, which is something that is a privacy in place in Europe, especially in European countries, they have security measures in place. We actually don't really screen too heavily at all international families unless they kind of raise their hand and say that they would like to be engaged, with the college, especially through the Office of Advancement. There are a lot of murky gray areas right now with GDPR. I know a couple of years ago, it was a really hot topic for a lot of us in prospect research. There was talks about potentially being fined. Your institution could be fined if they were to find out that you actually looked into families from, that were international. Canada also has some pretty strict privacy laws as well. So typically for our shop, we really focus on families that are based in America. That doesn't mean we don't look into families overseas, but we really wait for those families to kind of come forward and say that they maybe would like to be on Parents Council, or show almost like a buy-in to the work that we're doing in advancement. So that kind of allows us the opportunity to then screen them without any type of repercussions. So.
At Cornell, we have an international team that does work with a lot of our international donors, including families. They do a lot of regional events because of GDPR. It is hard to get access to families. We do welcome letters to families, and then that's a way that they raise their hands, and I'll meet with them one-on-one when they're on campus, if they're here for orientation, or, that's also another indicator though. If a family is able to come back to campus for certain events from overseas, it's a wealth indicator that we use, and we use that to start the conversation.
Absolutely. And I'll say sometimes doing those solicitations, parent solicitations, and doing like a mass mailing like that will, that's sometimes the best way to reach some of our international families, and to have them kind of raise their hands and say, we'd like to be more engaged. Or absolutely, those campus events, like a president's reception or something, if families are coming from overseas and gift officers are meeting them at a parent or presidential reception, that's a great way to get that ball rolling, especially with our international, families. That's a great question. So I'm just going to, in the couple minutes that we have left, I just wanted to put this screen up real quick because obviously Cora and I could talk about parent philanthropy and prospect research, and the dynamic duo that makes it happen. But if we didn't answer one of your questions, or if you had a question that we didn't, or a thought that comes to you after we wrap up, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to talk to other fundraisers and other prospect researchers in the field. It's always fun to do that and to compare notes. So please do that. Is there anything else in the chat, Cora?
I didn't see anything.
No. Okay. Oh, here's Jay.
Well, I just have to reappear. I want to thank you both for this so much, and especially because of the internet, waging war against you in the middle of this, but it didn't stop anything. And obviously, the majority of the people stuck with us here to listen and absorb. If there are any questions, of course, you can post them now. But also, as you can see, and I'll go ahead and read this for those who are not looking at the screen, that you can reach Cora over there on LinkedIn, of course, and via email. And Cora, if you don't mind, I'll take the liberty of reading your email address, which is cburns@cornell.edu. And of course, Emily is over there at Skidmore as well, and her email address is, and I'll spell this out, emarcaso@skidmore.edu. But once again, you can find them both on LinkedIn, if not at your local conference, because they do speak lots of different places. Plus, actually, I hope you don't mind my saying this, Emily, but you also do a fair amount of writing that has nothing to do with what you've been sharing today. So yeah. I don't know if you still have your page up and ready and available, and your book.
I do.
But that's for those who like to read, and I think most of us in this field do. Where can you find out more about that?
Yeah, you just Google my name, and that'll pop right up. I do a lot of writing, especially for AmeriForce Media, which is one of the biggest military publications. So I do a lot of writing for military families, and there's also some fiction up there too.
And I know we could talk about this stuff all day. We really could, because at some level, I think everybody in this room, everybody who watches this later, is an alum of someplace, and many are parents. So we have this experience personally, and we probably have thoughts about what works and what doesn't for us personally. I hope that can be a part of our conversations within our institutions, informed by what you've shared with us, because it's so important that we not let people kind of drift in and out of our orbit after a few years, and then not let them wear the brand along with the rest of us. So thank you both so much for sharing all this. We really do appreciate it. I also want to encourage those who are in the room with us to join us next week. We have sessions coming up with a specialist on film fundraising. This is an unusual topic for this series, and I'm so happy to have it. It's 5 stages to expanding your fundraising team. That comes up on Tuesday. And we also have strategies for nonprofits in a changing fundraising landscape, where we'll be talking about the rise of AI, debate on donor advised funds, which is very hot this week, particularly, and the shortage of talent in the nonprofit sector. That's all coming up in a discussion with Lawrence Pagnoni, and that's on Thursday. So lots to see and do, and I hope you'll all be a part of that conversation. You can find out more about it at the DonorSearch site at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, or you can just stay tuned and grab the QR code, and then you can be up on the list to learn about these things as they occur. So with that, I want to thank you both again for taking time to share today. Really do appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time. So then, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.